announcing today a major show of military force in the region.
Just before dawn, in the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most heavily militarized corridors, something moved beneath the surface. The sea was calm, the sky still dark, and the crew of the U.S. Navy destroyer on routine patrol had no visible sign that history was about to pivot in a matter of minutes. Then the first alert sounded. What began as a faint, almost dismissible sonar anomaly quickly evolved into a pattern no one on the bridge could ignore. Multiple submerged contacts, moving deliberately, closing distance. Within seconds, the atmosphere aboard the warship shifted from routine vigilance to combat readiness. Orders were issued sharply, watertight doors sealed, radar operators scanned for surface support. Somewhere below, unseen and silent, Iranian submarines were maneuvering into position. The Strait of Hormuz is no ordinary stretch of water. Nearly a fifth of the world's oil flows through this narrow passage every single day. Any disruption here can send shockwaves through global markets within hours. But on this morning, the stakes were not just economic. They were strategic, political, potentially catastrophic. The presence of Iranian naval assets in the area was not unusual. Neither was the steady patrol of American forces. What was unusual was the sudden disappearance of distance between them. According to early reports that would later emerge from regional intelligence sources, the submarines had been tracking the American vessel for hours. Some analysts claim this was a calculated show of force. Others suggest it was a message meant to test response times and rules of engagement. Whatever the intent, the effect was immediate. The U.S. ship altered course. Defensive systems were activated. Communications traffic surged across encrypted channels. Then came the moment that changed everything. A rapid sequence of underwater movements triggered countermeasures from the American destroyer. Flares illuminated the pre-dawn sky. The calm surface of the strait erupted with sudden kinetic tension. For several breathless minutes, the world's most advanced naval technologies were locked in a silent contest beneath the waves. No official declaration of hostility had been made, and yet, in that confined stretch of water, two military powers were engaged in a high-stakes confrontation that could spiral beyond control. International monitoring stations picked up unusual naval signals. Regional shipping traffic slowed. Oil markets reacted before governments did. In Washington and Tehran, emergency briefings were convened as fragmented reports began filtering in. Each side accused the other of provocation. Each claimed defensive intent. But the truth of what happened in those critical minutes remains contested. Was this a deliberate escalation? A miscalculation? Or a carefully staged warning in a larger geopolitical chess game? Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and eyewitness accounts paint a fragmented picture, one that suggests this encounter was more than a routine naval shadowing operation. Tonight, we break down the timeline of events, the strategic implications, and the unanswered questions that continue to fuel speculation. What really happened beneath the waters of the Strait of Hormuz? And how close did the world come to witnessing a direct naval clash between Iran and the United States? Stay with us as we uncover the details behind the incident that nearly ignited a regional crisis. In the early hours of the morning, the Strait of Hormuz looked deceptively peaceful. The narrow waterway, barely 21 nautical miles across at its widest navigable point, has long been one of the most strategically sensitive corridors on the planet. Nearly 20% of the world's traded oil passes through this channel each day, making it a constant focus of international naval presence and surveillance. On that particular night, visibility was clear, the sea state mild, and commercial tanker traffic was moving steadily along established shipping lanes under the watchful eyes of regional monitoring stations. A U.S. Navy guided missile destroyer, part of a routine rotational deployment under the Fifth Fleet headquartered in Bahrain, was conducting what officials would later describe as a standard maritime security patrol. At 4:17 local time, according to reconstructed accounts, a sonar operator aboard the destroyer noticed an irregular acoustic return. At first, it registered as background noise, possibly thermal layers in the water column or distant commercial propellers refracting oddly in the confined strait. The Strait of Hormuz is known for its complex underwater acoustics. Shallow depths, heavy shipping traffic, and varying salinity levels often distort sonar readings. But within minutes, the contact appeared again. This time it was sharper, more consistent, and moving against the prevailing traffic pattern. The watch team elevated the report to the Combat Information Center. Procedures in such situations are well established. Verify, cross-check, classify. A second sonar sweep revealed not one but multiple submerged contacts operating at varying depths. While Iran is known to maintain a fleet of diesel-electric submarines, including domestically produced Ghadir-class vessels designed specifically for operations in shallow coastal waters, their movements are typically monitored through a combination of satellite observation, regional intelligence sharing, and maritime patrol aircraft. What made this detection unusual was the proximity. The contacts were closer than expected for routine patrol overlap. By 4:26, the destroyer had shifted from a relaxed patrol posture to a heightened state of readiness. Crew members later described a subtle but unmistakable change in atmosphere. Casual bridge conversations stopped mid-sentence, coffee cups were set aside, and communication headsets were adjusted with quiet urgency. The commanding officer was summoned to the bridge. External lights were adjusted, and the ship's speed altered slightly to test whether the underwater contacts would mirror the maneuver. They did. At the same time, commercial vessel tracking systems reportedly showed 2 oil tankers reducing speed several miles to the northeast, though no official link was ever confirmed. Regional maritime chatter on open frequencies dipped noticeably, as if captains sensed tension without knowing its source. A U.S. maritime patrol aircraft operating hundreds of miles away was quietly redirected toward the strait, a detail that would surface only later through anonymous defense sources. What raised further concern was the pattern of movement detected shortly before 4:40. The submerged contacts appeared to fan out, positioning themselves in a loose arc ahead of the American destroyer's projected course. Analysts would later debate whether this was an aggressive maneuver or a defensive formation intended to signal territorial assertion. The strait's narrow traffic separation scheme leaves little room for misinterpretation. Even minor course adjustments can be perceived as deliberate signaling. On board the destroyer, internal announcements instructed non-essential personnel to remain clear of certain compartments. Watertight integrity checks were performed as a precaution, standard in any situation involving uncertain underwater activity. The crew had trained extensively for scenarios involving submarine shadowing, particularly in confined waterways where reaction times are compressed. Yet training does little to quiet the awareness that a single miscalculation in such waters could escalate rapidly. Meanwhile, regional radar installations reportedly detected increased encrypted transmissions from coastal facilities along Iran's southern shoreline. While such communications are not uncommon during naval exercises, their timing added to the growing sense that this was more than coincidence. By 4:45, the American vessel was fully aware that it was being tracked beneath the surface. What remained unclear was intent. In one of the most strategically vital choke points on Earth, with global energy markets only hours away from opening in Asia, the margin for error had narrowed to seconds. By the time the underwater contacts were confirmed as deliberate movements rather than environmental noise, the encounter had entered a far more dangerous phase. In confined waters like the Strait of Hormuz, where the navigable shipping lanes in each direction are only about 2 miles wide and separated by a buffer zone, even small tactical maneuvers carry outsized consequences. The U.S. destroyer adjusted its course by several degrees to starboard, a calculated move designed not only to maintain safe separation from commercial traffic, but also to test whether the submerged contacts would continue to track its vector. Within minutes, sonar operators reported that at least 2 of the contacts had matched the change in heading with unsettling precision. Iran's naval doctrine in the Persian Gulf has long emphasized asymmetric tactics, particularly the use of small submarines, fast attack craft, and coastal missile batteries to offset the technological superiority of larger navies. The shallow, cluttered seabed of the strait favors smaller diesel-electric submarines that can operate quietly on battery power. Intelligence assessments over the past decade have consistently noted that Iran trains its submarine crews for operations in precisely these kinds of narrow maritime choke points. What appeared to be unfolding was consistent with that doctrine: shadowing, positioning, and strategic signaling without overt engagement. Inside the American destroyer's Combat Information Center, the situation was recalculated in real time. The ship's captain ordered a controlled speed increase, pushing the vessel slightly above its previous cruising pace while maintaining compliance with international navigation rules. The intent was to widen the distance and force the submerged units either to accelerate, making themselves noisier and easier to classify, or to break contact. Instead, sonar readings suggested the opposite. One contact dipped deeper, while another moved closer along the port quarter, exploiting the acoustic blind spots created by passing merchant ships. At approximately 4:52, a brief but sharp acoustic spike registered across multiple consoles, interpreted by some operators as a possible active sonar ping from one of the submarines. If confirmed, such a move would represent a significant escalation, as active sonar reveals position but can serve as a deliberate warning. Official statements later denied that any active targeting occurred, but internal accounts suggested the moment triggered an immediate tightening of defensive posture aboard the destroyer. Countermeasure systems were placed on standby, and the crew transitioned fully to a combat footing without issuing any public distress or engagement signal. Above the surface, the American vessel executed a subtle zigzag maneuver known in naval operations as a clearance pattern, commonly used when submarine presence is suspected. This maneuver complicates firing solutions and forces underwater units to continuously adjust calculations. What made the exchange particularly tense was the density of civilian traffic nearby. Two liquefied natural gas carriers were transiting westbound less than 5 miles away, and any sudden escalation could have endangered not just military personnel, but commercial crews and cargo with global economic implications. Unconfirmed regional reports later suggested that a third submarine briefly surfaced its periscope within visual range of the destroyer, though this detail has never been independently verified. If true, it would indicate an intentional display rather than covert tracking. On the American ship, lookouts scanned the horizon while radar operators tracked fast-moving surface contacts originating near the Iranian coastline, possibly patrol boats repositioning in response to the developing situation. As minutes stretched on, both sides engaged in what naval analysts describe as tactical conversation without words. Every turn, speed adjustment, and depth change carried meaning. The destroyer's helicopter detachment reportedly prepared for launch, rotors positioned for rapid deployment, though no aircraft ultimately took off. Launching a helicopter equipped with dipping sonar would have dramatically shifted the balance of awareness and potentially been interpreted as an aggressive step. By 5:03, the underwater contacts had tightened their formation ahead of the destroyer's path, creating what appeared to be a narrowing corridor. Whether this was a calculated attempt to shepherd the American vessel away from a specific area or a demonstration of encirclement capability remains debated. What is clear is that both sides were now maneuvering within a compressed space where reaction times were measured in seconds. In one of the world's most strategically vital waterways, first contact had evolved into a silent, high-stakes contest of positioning, nerve, and intent. What followed after the initial maneuvering pushed the encounter from a tense shadowing operation into a moment that many aboard the destroyer would later describe as the closest brush with open conflict they had ever experienced. As previously noted, both sides had already adjusted course and posture, but shortly after 5:10 local time, the underwater geometry shifted dramatically. One of the submerged contacts accelerated sharply, producing a transient acoustic signature consistent with a rapid propulsion surge. Whether it was a deliberate feint or a navigational correction remains disputed, but inside the American vessel, it was interpreted as a potential attack run. Within seconds, the destroyer deployed non-lethal underwater countermeasures designed to confuse tracking solutions without constituting an offensive strike. These systems, widely acknowledged components of modern naval defense, release acoustic decoys intended to draw attention away from the hull. The sudden deployment altered the underwater soundscape. Sonar operators reported chaotic returns as decoy signatures mixed with genuine propulsion noise. In the confined environment of the strait, reverberations amplified the confusion. For several seconds, command personnel faced a narrow decision window: escalate to active anti-submarine procedures or maintain controlled deterrence. U.S. naval doctrine in such scenarios emphasizes graduated response, particularly in politically sensitive waterways. Instead of launching weapons, the captain authorized a high-intensity illumination of the surrounding waters using surface flares and infrared targeting systems. The move was defensive but unmistakably assertive, signaling that the destroyer was prepared to act if necessary. At approximately 5:14, a sharp underwater detonation was detected several hundred meters off the ship's starboard side. Later analysis suggested it may have been a pre-programmed training charge or a signal device rather than an actual torpedo impact. But in the moment, the crew could not assume benign intent. Shock sensors registered the blast wave, and for an instant the possibility of structural damage flashed through the command chain. Damage control teams reported no hull breach, yet the message was clear. The confrontation had reached a point where misinterpretation could lead to live fire. Above the surface, regional monitoring stations began registering unusual naval communications traffic. International maritime observers, including European commercial shipping consortia, noted brief disruptions in automated identification system data transmissions from vessels near the area, though no direct evidence linked these interruptions to deliberate interference. In Washington and Tehran, defense officials were reportedly awakened for emergency briefings, as real-time intelligence feeds relayed fragments of the developing encounter. Publicly, both governments would later characterize the event as a close interaction, but internal assessments treated it as a potential flashpoint. The climax unfolded in less than 3 minutes but carried strategic weight far beyond its duration. One of the submarines altered depth rapidly and moved across the projected bow of the American destroyer at a distance later estimated to be under 1,000 meters. In naval terms, that proximity in a choke point leaves virtually no margin for error. The destroyer responded by executing a hard port maneuver combined with a controlled speed reduction, a choice intended to avoid presenting a direct pursuit profile. Simultaneously, a warning broadcast was transmitted on internationally recognized maritime safety frequencies, declaring the presence of hazardous maneuvering and requesting immediate deconfliction. No direct reply was received, but sonar signatures indicated that at least one submerged contact began withdrawing toward deeper water closer to the Iranian coastline. Whether this withdrawal was pre-planned or triggered by the destroyer's response remains unknown. Some analysts later speculated that the encounter may have been designed as a calibrated demonstration of reach and resolve, stopping short of weapons engagement while showcasing operational proximity. Others argued that the rapid acceleration and underwater blast suggested a breakdown in coordination among the submarines themselves. What is certain is that, by 5:20, the geometry of confrontation had shifted decisively. The arc formation dissolved, acoustic signatures spread out, and the immediate threat of encirclement diminished. The aftermath unfolded in layers. On board the American vessel, comprehensive system checks were conducted, and encrypted situation reports were transmitted to regional command. No casualties were reported, and no confirmed weapons impacts were recorded. Commercial shipping resumed normal speeds within the hour, though insurance risk assessments for transit through the strait reportedly spiked temporarily in subsequent days. Energy markets reacted with short-lived volatility as traders responded to early, incomplete reports of a possible naval clash. Diplomatically, both sides moved quickly to control the narrative. Iranian state media described the incident as a defensive maneuver in response to what it termed provocative presence by foreign forces near its territorial waters. U.S. defense officials countered that the destroyer had been operating in international waters under established freedom of navigation principles. Behind closed doors, intermediaries in regional capitals are said to have facilitated urgent back-channel communications aimed at preventing further escalation. Such crisis management channels are not unprecedented. past, tensions in the Gulf have often been diffused through indirect dialogue, even when public rhetoric remained firm. In the days that followed, satellite imagery analysis and maritime traffic reconstructions provided a more comprehensive picture of the encounter's geography, though many operational details remained classified. Military analysts noted that the event underscored the inherent risks of close-quarter naval operations in one of the world's most strategically vital choke points. The Strait of Hormuz has witnessed confrontations before, from tanker incidents during the late 20th century to periodic drone and patrol boat standoffs in recent years. Yet this episode stood out for the degree of submerged maneuvering in such a compressed maritime corridor. Ultimately, the confrontation ended without confirmed exchange of live fire, but it left both navies acutely aware of how quickly calibrated signaling can edge toward unintended escalation. The combination of strategic mistrust, dense commercial traffic, and advanced underwater capabilities created a volatile mix in which seconds carried geopolitical consequence. While official statements emphasized restraint and professionalism, the encounter served as a reminder that in narrow waters where global energy lifelines converge, even silent movements beneath the surface can reverberate far beyond the horizon. In the immediate aftermath of the confrontation, the most urgent priority for both sides was containment. As previously described, the encounter unfolded in one of the world's most strategically sensitive maritime choke points, and any sustained escalation could have triggered consequences far beyond the region. Within hours, military leadership in both countries initiated internal reviews, focusing not only on tactical performance, but on decision-making thresholds. According to defense sources, the U.S. Navy conducted a rapid operational assessment, examining reaction timing, communication flow, and adherence to established rules of engagement. Such reviews are standard practice after high-risk encounters, particularly in contested environments like the Persian Gulf, where miscalculation has historically carried geopolitical ramifications. On the Iranian side, officials publicly framed the episode as a demonstration of defensive vigilance, while privately, regional analysts suggested that senior commanders evaluated whether the signaling had achieved its intended strategic effect without crossing into open hostilities. Iran's naval doctrine, which emphasizes deterrence through proximity and asymmetric leverage, depends heavily on carefully calibrated actions. A maneuver perceived as too aggressive risks inviting retaliation, too restrained, and it fails to project resolve. Balancing that line requires disciplined command and control, especially in congested waters, where civilian vessels are constantly present. Internationally, diplomatic channels activated quickly. Oman and Qatar, both of which have previously served as intermediaries during Gulf tensions, reportedly facilitated quiet exchanges aimed at clarifying intent and preventing retaliatory deployments. While no formal statements acknowledged back-channel talks, maritime traffic data in subsequent days showed no unusual surge in naval reinforcements from either side, suggesting that immediate de-escalation efforts were effective. Energy markets, which had reacted sharply in early trading sessions following initial reports, stabilized once it became clear that no sustained combat operations had occurred. The incident also prompted renewed discussion among defense experts about confidence-building measures in high-risk maritime corridors. Proposals resurfaced for updated communication protocols similar to Cold War-era naval incident agreements designed to reduce accidental clashes. Although no such framework currently governs U.S.-Iran naval interactions directly, the logic of structured deconfliction has precedent in other regions. Some analysts even pointed to quiet technical workshops held in previous years under multinational maritime security initiatives, suggesting that professional familiarity between naval officers, however limited, may have helped prevent split-second decisions from spiraling. Privately circulated intelligence summaries indicated that both militaries had exercised restraint at critical junctures, a factor likely decisive in preventing escalation. The fact that the encounter concluded without confirmed weapons exchange reinforced a shared understanding of the catastrophic economic and political consequences that a sustained clash in the Strait of Hormuz would produce. Nearly a fifth of global petroleum trade depends on uninterrupted transit through those waters, and any prolonged disruption would reverberate across supply chains worldwide. In the longer term, the episode served as a reminder that deterrence in confined maritime environments is inherently fragile. Advanced surveillance, rapid response capabilities, and layered defensive systems reduce vulnerability, but cannot eliminate ambiguity. The margin between signaling and confrontation remains narrow, measured not only in nautical miles, but in seconds of judgment. While public rhetoric on both sides emphasized sovereignty and operational rights, the quiet recalibration that followed suggested a mutual recognition of risk. The waters of the strait returned to their routine flow of tankers and patrol ships, yet beneath that surface, calm lingered an awareness that the next close encounter could demand even steadier restraint.